Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. This video is called Closing Deal, and it's all about making sure that you get your money, your buyer gets their item, and you can confront any potential issues or common scenarios that may arise that are a hurdle to closing that deal. So we'll walk through some of those common issues, and then at the very end we'll talk about what you should do if your items are not selling, which is another obstacle to closing the deal. As an upfront, I'll acknowledge that this is like some of my other videos where I'll be using this Google document as the primary piece to consider when talking through these different scenarios and the topics of the video. I'll make this available through the description and or comments. That way, if you're really wanting to keep this on file, you're welcome to do so. So be on the lookout for that if you would like to reference this again. Before we dive into specific scenarios that you will inevitably face, I want to just speak my mindset going into any issue that may arise with a buyer, and that is the phrase, on to the next sale. What that means is you should not waste your precious time hassling or harassing non-payers or people requesting to cancel bids or purchases. It's not worth your time. You want to move on to the next sale. And as fun as it could be to play chess or checkers through messages and get the best out of someone who you think is being a clown on eBay, it is not worth your time. Just move on. And it will enable you to do things that are more value added, like making the next sale. So that's my top philosophy before discussing these scenarios. Other things to keep in mind is that the block button is your friend, and that includes automatic blocking, which you can do on eBay for people with non-payer strikes against their account. So don't be afraid to block someone. This is not personal. I also maintain the philosophy that when I'm selling to people on the internet, I want to keep it as impersonal as possible. And what I mean by that is I do not want to think personally of the person I'm selling to, but I want to provide an amazing experience, and I want them to feel loyal to my store, to my brand, and not loyal or angry at me as a person. And same thing back to them. I want to think of them as a loyal customer and not someone I'm personally angry at for not paying on time or anything like that. So don't be afraid to block. It's a good tool. There are many, many collectors and buyers out there. You won't lose all your business by blocking a single seller. On that note, and I should rephrase that by blocking a potential buyer, but on that note, eBay is highly preferential to buyers. You'll read many, many sob stories on the internet about just how favorable eBay is towards buyers and how often eBay will take a buyer's side as opposed to the seller. So you want to take good care of them. Your reputation's at stake, your feedback is at stake, and at the end of the day, those are reasons why buyers make decisions on who they buy from. If you have bad feedback due to multiple bad experiences or bad customer satisfaction stories, that's going to impact your business moving forward. So let's jump to these scenarios. These are kind of sort of listed in order of most likely to happen. If you sell enough, you will experience these. And I've kind of given a programmatic, process-based approach in these bullet points of things that you can and maybe should do when these scenarios inevitably arrive. First, the buyer never pays, and they ghost you, and they get payment reminders, so you do not have to waste any time sending personal messages to them. They're going to be reminded. My advice, wait 4 days, and that's the required time period by eBay where you can, that is the time frame that the buyer is entitled to pay within that window, and it's considered an on-time payment. But if they're ghosting you, wait 4 days. Cancel that sale, list the buyer as a non-payer, and almost every time this happens, I will block the buyer, and then I'll relist the item, usually in the same format that it was. If it's an auction, I may not relist right away. I'll relist at a favorable time such that the auction ends at a good time with the most amount of potential bidders on it. Now, I kind of hinted at this earlier, but there is a feature you can go into on eBay and block buyers who have strikes against them as non-payers. I highly recommend doing this. You are able to set the criteria in terms of the number and also the time scale where this has happened. So I think my setting, which I haven't touched in probably a year and a half, is 2 strikes within the past 6 months. I do not allow them to buy or bid on any of my items, or at least bid. They may be able to purchase outright. I'm not sure how it works, but thankfully, these issues have gone away for the most part since setting up that session or that setting. The next one, this is a little more rare, is someone who is actually actively messaging you and say, hey, I'll pay soon, I'll pay tomorrow. I had this recently where a buyer kept saying they would pay tomorrow. I would pay tomorrow. And I don't care. I'm generally a patient guy and I don't need the money ASAP, so I'm okay waiting. But if they're messaging you, they're probably open to you messaging them back. And so I did send a follow-up message in this scenario saying, hey, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cancel this if this is not paid by tomorrow. And that's because I have potential other customers for this item. And sure enough, the buyer did pay the next day. And so by waiting, I was able to secure a deal. And this was not an insignificant deal. It was probably a $30 to $40 purchase. So it would have been a hassle to relist that and wait for a next buyer. So wait 4 days, wait 5 days. Really depends on how you feel about the situation. But after 4 days, that's when you can cancel that sale. It's a good idea. No hurt feelings. List the buyer as a non-payer. You can consider blocking the buyer if you think life popped up. Give them some grace. You don't necessarily need to, but always a good idea to block people you don't want to deal with and then relist the item. No problem. On to the next sale. The next one, I never received the item. This, unfortunately, is a more frequent experience than you would like with the eBay standard envelope postage. And there's a couple of reasons for that. The first one, which I would hope is a lower amount, is a buyer who is lying, a buyer who is being fraudulent, and they're saying the item never arrived. And the thing about eBay standard envelope postage is the tracking is not particularly accurate. So in many cases, it won't even be marked as delivered. In that case, if a buyer wants to be just mean to you by lying, they can and sometimes do probably say this never arrived. So that's kind of the first scenario when this may happen is eBay standard envelope, the item's not marked as delivered, and the buyer may be lying. The second one, which is way more common, someone is not familiar with eBay standard envelope. They get an alert on their eBay saying, hey, this transaction has been delivered. They are super excited. They walk to their mailbox and hey, nothing is there. And the reason for that is that the tracking with eBay standard envelope just is not accurate. In many, many cases, it will actually arrive within 1 to 2 days, usually pretty close to that automated message that says it has arrived. And so in this case, the buyer's being honest. It says delivered, hey, this item never showed up. And so I always ask kindly to wait 1 to 2 days as tracking is not always accurate. And I do that in both cases, whether or not the person may be lying. But just because of the inconsistencies with the alerts and notifications, it's a good thing to say, hey, do you mind waiting a few days? After that, if the buyer's really impatient and still claims it never arrived, 2 options here. If it has not been marked as delivered, you will want to issue a refund to that buyer. However, if it has been marked as delivered, you can issue a refund or you can tell the buyer to file a dispute. And because it is marked as delivered, eBay almost certainly sides with the seller if the item is logged as delivered. And so you don't have to give a refund and you can keep the money and the buyer will just have to deal with it. I normally will err towards issuing the refund and giving the buyer the benefit of the doubt in that it actually did not arrive. If I don't trust them, if I think they're making things up, I'll block them. And then the nice thing about eBay Standard Envelope is they have a fairly generous insurance policy where you wait 30 days, you file an insurance claim through the partial insurance program, and boom, you get your full sale value back. Note, that does not include anything that you charge for shipping and handling. So say you sold an item for $2 and you charged $1 for shipping with eBay Standard Envelope. that insurance claim will only get you $2 back for that item subtotal. This is one of the reasons why I offer free shipping on all of my eBay standard envelope sales. That way, if you do a $3 sale with free shipping offered to the buyer, you get that $3 back and all shipping material costs that you may have incurred are back in your pocket. So that's how I go about the I never received the item claim. Another one you'll come across is the item came damaged. And this, especially with eBay standard envelope, is a risk just given the nature of plain white envelope postage. The same analogy would apply to something like Ground Advantage postage, which used to be known as first class through United States Postal Service. What you want to do here is ask for pictures. You want to have that documented on your chat. That way eBay or the post office doesn't come and claim that either of you is being fraudulent. And then at this point, depending on the situation, you can issue a full or partial refund, kind of negotiate over the messaging. Another option that I don't have listed here would be a return, which for low dollar things like low-end trading cards, which is mainly the space I play, a return just doesn't make practical sense because then you or the buyer have to pay to send that back to you, and then you're getting back a damaged item that you probably won't be able to sell again if it wasn't worth much in the first place. So I've had one scenario where I sent 2 cards through eBay standard envelope and one arrived with a giant crease in the middle. And so what I just did there is I said, hey, you can keep both of them. I'm going to give you a partial refund for one of them. And then once again, I used this partial insurance program to get an insurance claim after waiting 30 days for that damaged item. And it was a partial claim. It wasn't the full order, but it did cover the one card that was damaged in transit and that I refunded. All right, the next few, you'll also come across, occasionally someone will cancel or want to cancel their bid. Really up to you. If you think the thing's going to be going up in price, you can just say, hey, I'm going to cancel the sale if you end up winning the auction. Or you could tell them to go pound sand if you really want. I don't think that's great customer service, but I've done this before. I said, hey, let's see what the result of this auction is, and if you win, I'll go ahead and honor my word and cancel that. And that's totally fine. But you also don't want to cancel the whole auction early, especially if that helps drive up the price, which in theory it does. If you do have to cancel that, the whole transaction, you can relist, block the buyer if you really feel like it, and move on with your life. As for an order, I've had this happen recently where someone orders something and then immediately puts in a cancellation request before I can ship. Whatever, move on. Cancel it, relist, block the buyer if you're really feeling like it, and on to the next sale. These are not situations where you should hassle a buyer, especially if you haven't spent any time packaging or shipping or thinking about it. If you go on, one of these happened overnight where I apparently made a sale, and by the time I woke up, all while I was sleeping, the buyer requested to cancel. Great. They didn't waste really any of my time. Yeah, I have to click a couple buttons to cancel it, but I'm not going to hold them hostage over just a really small matter. I'll cancel it and I'll move on. The last one here, and this unfortunately happens a lot, and it does cause you a little bit of a financial headache, a little bit being a 30-cent transaction fee, is when a buyer pays separately for different items that you, at the same time that you then can combine in a shipment. eBay, especially when dealing with offers, does not do a good job of combining shipments or combining invoices. And many times it'll process separate transactions for these different items, even if you're going to ship them together. The sticky gray area here relates to shipping discounts because you are incurring an additional transaction fee of 30 cents per transaction for each of these separate payments. Imagine a buyer at a fast food restaurant going up, making an order, sitting down, eating out, then eating it, and then going back and making a second order. So it's 2 transactions, even though they're sitting there the whole time. For you as an eBay seller, you're going to get 2 transaction fees, even though it should be the same order. And eBay, unfortunately, just does not handle that well in all circumstances. So assess the value of the order. If it's low dollar, you probably won't want to offer any partial refund or a shipping note or a combined shipping note. And that's just because it's technically the buyer's mistake. But you also don't want to gouge them. So if they, for whatever reason, order a bunch of different cards, and they end up somehow paying for $15 worth of shipping, this is just a hypothetical, you probably should give them a little money back so that they don't totally roast you on shipping charges when it comes to feedback. Now, one good way around this is just to offer free shipping on everything, which removes some headaches related to combined invoices, and then you actually don't really need to feel any guilt about combining shipping for them. So that's one way to really almost avoid this entirely. So those are some common scenarios. I will have this link available. If you run into any other scenarios, I'd love to hear from you in the comments to see if there's anything else. These are probably the most common things that I run into selling sports trading cards, but I'm sure there's more out there. All right, last part of this video related to closing the deal. We're going to talk about what you can do when your items aren't selling. You haven't even gotten to a point where you can run into issues, but these are all different tactics for getting your items sold as opposed to sitting on your shelf. The most obvious one, Economics 101, lower the price. If you lower the price, you're going to have a better chance at someone being willing to pay that. The other thing you can do is change a buy it now. That's what BIN stands for. Change a buy it now listing to an auction. You have a better chance of success, especially if it's a lower price, selling at an auction versus a buy it now. And it may increase your likelihood of getting that item off your shelf. The next thing is sending offers to watchers. eBay is pretty nice, actually, when you have a buy it now listing and people are watching it. In many cases, you have an opportunity to send an offer directly to someone who's already expressed interest in the item. So you have a much higher sales conversion rate with this versus just leaving your item in your shop and maybe not having any watchers on it. The next few are a little more aggressive and take a little more work to do or money, but group items into lots. A lot of times with stale inventory of similar types of baseball cards, I'll group them into lots and sell them that way. Way, way, way worse profit margins per card, but you might get rid of a bunch of inventory and it might help you get a little bit of revenue in the process, which could be a good thing. And then other selling platforms. Outside of eBay, I sell on Reddit quite a bit, and I found Reddit is a really, really good place to clear low dollar, low value cards that may not move on eBay. There are a lot of really eager team and player collectors, and I've just observed that many people on Reddit want to have a smaller total sale amount compared to eBay. So if you can sell a card at 50 cents with no fees, just in an envelope, they're going to be willing to pay that. Whereas on eBay, after factoring all the fees as a seller, you may have to list that at a higher price. So that's another option to try to close the deal. And then finally, this is something I really don't play with. I've done it before, but I'm not convinced it's really that effective. And that's promoting the listing either through marketing or through the promotions manager on eBay. Some people really do stand by the idea that you should promote all listings at, say, a 2%, which is kind of an arbitrary made-up number related to how eBay feeds this stuff into its algorithm. So this is something you can consider if you really want to sell something or get visibility. But personally, I don't mess with this. I'd rather wait a little bit longer. And it's really hard to assess if this truly does make a difference in your sales conversions. Anyhow, hope you enjoyed this discussion on closing the deal with common scenarios and issues, as well as a few quick tips on how to move stale inventory when your items aren't selling. As always, I'd encourage you to like and subscribe this channel if you're interested in content like this. Let me know what you'd like to see next, and be on the lookout as we get more videos up here later in the weeks and months to come. Thanks for listening.